touch. Oh, wow, there's a new dashboard. At least there's a new giant blue banner. It's the same giant blue banner. I really wish companies would stop interfering with how their product works in order to advertise an upgrade to their product. Patreon's started to put giant banners below every email, so it's like, yeah, you know, the author contacts you. It's like, this is what I've made for the day, for the week, blah blah blah, and at the end it's like, boom, try the Patreon app. It's like, oh, well, great, thanks for ruining the author's message. It was really nice of you. I don't know why you'd ever need a Patreon app. It all happens by email. Sorry, I'm just whining while I try to wake up. Streaming, game dev, gonna do underwater stuff. Probably more shader crap. Alright, so this is where we are at the moment, but one of the things I didn't like is the way that the fog is working out. It's not that it's terrible, it's that it could be a lot better. So this is how the fog looks. I've got it set... Ooh. I put down my my headset on top of my Xbox controller. Alright, so this is what we've got right now, and you can see that I changed the distance just to see the sort of thing that we're looking at. And there are a couple of things I don't like about it. One of the things I don't like about it is I don't like how the fog follows the camera around. You can see how that rock in front of us, you can just barely make it out depending on your camera angle. I would like the camera to work based on the character's position rather than the camera's position. I'm not sure how to do that aside from passing in a vector 3 every frame. But more important than that, well, I guess they're equally important. I want to put in some perturbance. I want to put in some feeling like this actually has stuff between us and the fog. So we're going to do both of those things first because, oh, why not? They're good as a warm-up at the very least. So the camera in question is somewhere here. There it is. And here's the fog quad that we've been using. We don't have to put it in a quad. We could put it in some kind of post-effect thing, but at the moment it's in a quad. Rick Metalster says it finally feels like underwater. Hey, someone showed up today. Yep, we're starting to feel like we're a little underwater, and that is the point. So the big thing we're going to do to make it perturb is we're going to add a noise factor. But here is the key. We're going to add the noise factor more when it's below us. And that's going to just kind of reflect the fact that that's kind of like ground. But we'll go ahead and just add the noise factor first. So the basic idea here is that we've got this depth fade running. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this depth fade and put something between it and all of this other crap. We're going to put some noise in. So to do that, we're just going to put in the noise. We'll be using Simplex 3D, and then we're going to be passing in the world position. So that's not true, is it? Because the world position is the position of the little plane in front of the camera. We'll try it. It's not going to work, but we'll try it. So we'll just go ahead and stick that in there. Then we're going to go ahead and multiply it by a factor. Noise opacity. And we'll go ahead and give that a default value of 1. Mult. Yep. Now, of course, this world position actually needs to be multiplied and offset. So this is going to be noise frequency. Actually, we're going to just go ahead and stick a 1 in there. And that's going to allow us to change the world position. But we also need to add in a vector 3 noise speed, a noise movement. And we'll just go ahead and make those all ones. I've made all of these constants. They should all be properties. It's not a big deal. Property. And property. And then we're just going to take time. Yeah, this is a lot of steps, but that's what happens. And we're going to take the noise movement, multiply it by the time, and then add it to the world position. Rick Metalser says, can I ask you something? Do you know if it's possible to preview 3D files in the Blender import window? You know, I don't think Blender has a preview function. If they do, I've never seen a sign of it. So I would say instinct says no, there's no way to do it. Or at least not without a plugin that I'm not aware of. There are plugins galore, though, so maybe there is one that works. Oh, yeah, and then we also have to multiply it here. I forgot about that part. All right, so now what we've got is a noise field that gets modified and brought in, and then we can add that to the depth fade. Now the problem is that I'm not at all sure that the depth fade works the way I think it does, but we can try it. Worst comes to worst, it's pretty easy to restore these back to the way they were before. It's just a matter of piping things the correct direction. All right, so let's go ahead and give that a shot. It shouldn't work. The reason it shouldn't work is because we're taking the position of the little plane in front of the camera rather than the position of the thing behind in the backdrop. I am the wrong person to ask about Blender plugins because I have had nothing but bad luck. I don't happen to see anything. I think that why I don't see anything is because we have a noise frequency issue. You can see how there's a little bit of puffing. Poof, 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 poof. Let's go ahead and make the noise opacity bigger. There we are. So now we should be able to see the noise. You can see how that like whoosh. Bring it up to quite a high frequency, something like that's something like 9. And then we can bring this down to maybe 6. And you can see how that kind of sleets across the screen. Now the reason it's sleeting across the screen is because our speed is really, really high. And this really isn't exactly what we want. So what we'll do is we will make the speed vertical only. And we'll make it a small vertical factor. Z is not what I intended. I meant to make it Y. That's still very, very fast. Let's bring it down to 0.001, something like that. So you can see that there is an issue here. Rick Mendoza says, what's this effect emulating? Underwater fog? It's emulating the stuff, I've forgotten what I termed it. This junk. You see how there's like junk, dust? It's not really fog, it's particulate matter. But the problem is that it's simulating this on the tiny little window that's directly in front of the camera instead of on the actual backdrop. So what we get is a feeling like there's fog on the camera lens, which really isn't what I want. I don't think this is going to work. I don't believe there is any reasonable way for me to get the world coordinate that we're analyzing. I have the depth, but if I think about how to do it, what I would have to do is get the world position and then multiply it by the depth, and then here's the distance, and then also have the vector. It sounds like it would be a lot of work. I think this whole idea was just not going to work out, so we'll just delete it and say that was a warm-up. And we will go back to using the raw distance. That'll give us a really linear, sharp-edged feel, which isn't ideal, but I can't do the other thing at the moment. So if I hit play, it's back to being flat. See? Now, this is no means a terrible approach, but I really don't like the way that the fog kind of swoobles when I move the camera, and that's because this camera isn't actually where we're seeing from. This camera simulates the fact that we're seeing from the skull of the player character. So what we're actually going to want to do is use the skull of the player character as a target position instead of the position of the camera. So to do that, all we have to do is, instead of world pause, we're going to pass in a vector of our choice. So you see this vert position here? This vert position is the between the surface object and the geometry behind. So this vert position is, in theory, the world position of the... Hold on, this might not work. Because I don't have the world coordinates. All I've got is the distance field. But what I could do is I could pass it a float. So we're going to go ahead and create a property. It's going to be a public property, which we're going to call range to player. And that way when we move around... No, that's not going to help, is it? I mean, it'll help a little bit, but it's not going to help. This might be something I just have to live with until I come up with a genius way to fix it, because I was completely mistaken about how it worked. I just had it wrong in my head, and that means it's not going to be so easy. But basically, I don't like the way that when we move our camera, the fog sweeps in and out. That's just... It doesn't feel right to me, because that's not what happens when you tilt your head. The problem is, of course, that the camera isn't our head. The camera is floating behind the player. If the camera was our head, this wouldn't really be as much of an issue. It would still be a little bit of an issue due to the way that the lens effects happen at the end there, but it wouldn't be that much of an issue. So I guess we'll live with this for now, and we'll just continue our general development. Rick Metalster says that I could use this same effect, the fog effect, for darkened areas, and you bet I could. In fact, if I were to pull the player over into one of the areas that's supposed to be dark, I can show you what that's supposed to feel like. So I'll just stick the player maybe here-ish, and then hit play. So this is how it looks when the fog isn't edited, but this is a situation where the fog can be easily edited to give you a different effect. So what we can do is we can change the fog value from 0.142 to 0, and you can see it becomes really, really pitch black. Now in this case, the fog range is set very, very low, so you wouldn't want the range to be this low. You'd want the range to be maybe like that. Because if it's dark, the fog doesn't need to be very thick before it starts to choke everything down. But this room still needs some work. It's barely started, but you can see how the idea here is the depths of the ocean are black. Anyway, we have to actually click Control-Z to undo that stuff. Alright, so let's put the player back into the main scene. Can I just undo it again? There we are. So this is the main scene, right? And what we've got here is a lot of stuff that we might want to comment on as the player. There are some flaws with how this is set up at the moment. For example, I don't believe that the HAB has all of the colliders it needs, so we're going to go ahead and add in a collider. A mesh collider, if I can find it. There it is. And that's one of the ones we can actually make convex for the moment, at least. Oh, no, we can't. My bad. But I believe that all of these either need colliders or need to have, a spherical object. I think it's easier for us to just add mesh colliders to each of them for reasons that will become obvious much, much later. Since we can't go inside of these, there's no reason for us to worry about whether or not these are properly navigable, because this is not a situation where we are actually able to go inside, which means, you know what, I'm going to undo everything I just did. I think it makes more sense, after all, to give this a simple spherical collider. And all we have to do is move the, oh, that's not it, move this to 3? 3 is too high. It shouldn't really be. Oh, is it? No, I'm trying to figure out why this is so big. It shouldn't really be this big. Gonna go ahead and put it on a separate object. Create 3D object sphere. Boom. There we go. That one we can actually deal with. So we're just going to scale this up until it's the right size. We still need colliders for some of the objects, but we shouldn't need one for this object. We have a collider for this one already, but we don't have a collider for the tank. So we're going to go ahead and add a tube collider. It's not called tube, it's called capsule collider. And you can see how those are capsules, so it works fine. We've got most of these others already have colliders equipped. That was just one I overlooked. But the reason that we need these colliders is so that we can interact with this by bumping into it, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to create some fields where when we enter into the field, it counts as a thing that we can learn. Now, there aren't going to be any people in the final version of this. The people are just there because. One of the problems we've got is that the camera we're using, the face, doesn't actually aim where the camera is trying to aim, which means that we end up with some misbehaving cameras in situations like this, where the character refuses to look into the glass. And the reason for that is simple. The character doesn't realize that's glass. The character thinks that's rock. So the character's like, yeah, that's not something I really need to look inside of. It's just rock. It's obviously not just rock. You fool! You fell for it. The oldest trick in the book. So what we really need to do is have the head follow the camera angles, which we used to do, and then I disabled it. We'll have to re-enable it. But first, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and do that first, since it's something we will easily forget about later. German Trekkie says, so much progress happened. I work on this 3 hours a week, so I'm not sure how long you've been gone. But probably not as much progress as you think. So up here in the player, we've got this armature. If we take a look, we've got some head armature going on. And if you want to guess where that is, it's up here in the head bone. You can see this blue line out the front of the head. That's a really good sign because it implies that that is, in fact, local Z. Local Z is critically important for us because that is the thing that we want to point. That's what face forward does. So we should be able to just tell this to use that local Z and point it in the same direction as the camera. Now, I know that we used to have a script for that. Let's see here. There's track target, but I think that just moves. Yeah, it just moves the actual location. So I'm not sure if I deleted it or named it something different. It's a really basic script, though. I just don't want to create it twice because I'll be confused as to which one actually contains the things I need. We'll go ahead and put it in here. Match look direction. And basically all we're going to do is we're going to find a target transform, public transform target, and then we're going to just in update say transform dot look at why aren't you hello? Okay, so for some reason it's erroring. We'll just close it down and reopen it. Why is it not giving me the transform? There. Okay, it just took 45 seconds to figure out what was going on. So what we're going to want is to do the look at. We don't want to use look at, though. We want to use look direction. Another option is we can simply set their rotations to be the same. Let's try that first, just to see how that feels, because I have a feeling this is going to be like, but we'll see. So we're going to go over into the head bone here, drop that match look direction right in, and tell it to match the camera. Boom. Now I know that the camera's Z-axis should be exactly the same as the player's head, so let's move. And now I've moved the camera, and you can see that the head is not actually looking in the direction it's supposed to be. If we were to grab the head bone, this might be because the bone is under the control of... Yeah, I think that what's happening here is it's under the control of the animation, and it's refusing to give up. I think previously I was using an IK solution. IK solution should still be here. So there's the root motion. There's the final IK. I think I was using a face tracking system from this setup. There's a lot of possible options. I don't remember which one I was using, but let's go ahead and exchange this for now. We'll remove this because the IK1 is already set up to do the overrides properly, and it'll just be a pain in the ass to have to replicate that stuff. So if we take a look, got arm, biped, character animation, third person, head effector, settings, bend goal boxing, hands on top, hit reaction, leg, limb. Look at IK. So here we've got this idea where we can set it to look at something. Problem being, of course, that the thing we're looking at is a camera, which is not great. But don't really know yet. Let's try it, because I can just add in a fake look direction by grabbing this camera and simply creating an empty quad or an empty box, an empty thing that is in the other direction of the camera. So that's just down here somewhere. And we can call that look target. And the idea that this is the right way to do it is wrong. It's kind of pointless. But what we'll do eventually is probably replace this with something that actually does like look detection. We're not ready for that just yet, though. Boom. So if I were to hit play here, it's nothing. If it is something, it's so minor it's not detectable. It's definitely moving, but it's not moving in the direction I expected, and the question is, why is that? So you can see that the look is way over here, and the character is kind of looking down. Now, if I was doing full eyeball tracking, that might actually be the right angle to look at, because the eyes would then finish the curve, right? But if we're not doing full, well, let's see how this feels, and if it's solving the problem we have. I don't think it is, but we'll give it a shot. The idea is, can we look in this window? Nope. See how it's not tracking properly? So I'm not sure why, but the weighting seems wrong, and that's kind of a strange thing to have happen when I put the weight at 1. Yeah, so here's the spine weight curve. Maybe the spine weight curve is what's causing us the issue. Body weight, head weight, 0.5. The boom. Much better. All right, so now it should work. It's an IK solution, so it's like, IK obviously means that you want to get the whole neck involved, right? You're not some lazy bastard that's just rotating the head, are you? And now you can see that I can look inside, I can pan down, pan around, see all those mannequins in there. So it's solved, hooray! And we'll just delete the one I created, because there's no reason to leave it around if it's not going to do anything useful. It'll just confuse me later. Boom. Nope, that's not it. Boom. And let's see, what else was I going to do? I was going to make a collider that would trigger dialogue. So to do that, we have to understand how the dialogue engine works. There's a thing called a mystery. So if we take a look at the actual mission that we've got running here, mission, there it is. What happens is the mission contains any number of mysteries. Now this mission is the Room 1 mission, which contains the Room 1 mysteries. We might make it like all of the mysteries, like Room 1, then Room 2, then Room 3, or we might make separate missions for each. It's okay either way. But what I can do is I can add in mysteries that do not have a mission. And the result there is that your HUD will never guide them to you, but when you trip them, it'll still work. So that's what we're going to try and do here. Inside of Room 1, I guess we're going to try and make it inside of the actual just level here. No, inside of Room 1 is good. Create an empty mission, which we will call... Oh yeah, that's definitely inside of Room 1. When I think of Room 1, I think of Room 3. There we are. So we're going to take this object and we're going to call it Hab Mystery. And basically it's going to contain a whole bunch of random crap that you can stumble across as you are doing your work. So we're just going to go ahead and add in that mystery. Boom. This is what the mystery looks like, and the basic idea is that you've got objectives and you've got exposition. And the objectives and the exposition can be matched up one-to-one, but you'll always get the next exposition whenever you do an objective. Now, for most cases, that's fine, but in this case, we actually want them to be exact. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variant of the mystery which uses exact dialogue matching. Or we could just leave the exposition blank and have that be the case, couldn't we? Yeah, let's just leave... No, hold on, I'm trying to think. No, this is definitely something I want to be a bool here. Tooltip. If true, we'll only use objectives on the target object. So basically this will just lockstep them. And when we come down into our setup here, what we do is we normally do this part here, and instead what we're going to do is search for the exposition that's on the objective. So we're going to go ahead and say if use dialogue on objectives, else boom. And so if we're using the one on the objective, we're going to go through all of our dialogue, all of our expositions, and just find the one that's on the objective. The other way to do that, of course, is to just look on the objective. So we'll go ahead and say exposition. No, it's not actually an exposition. So what, a dialogue sequence? Mission scene. Mission scene S equals M equals objective.getComponent mission scene. If not M rather, then M equals objective.getComponent on children mission scene. If still nothing, then give us a big fat error. Hold on. The heater turned on for reasons unknown to me. Since it is roughly 80 in here. But it's probably roughly 80 like from my neck up, and the heater's on the floor. Alright, so debug log error, no scene mounted on object, objective.name. Wait, I can actually do that using the new... I'm trying to get used to using this new setup because it's better. Oh, shoot. There we are. So that's going to be an error. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and run it. m.onComplete.addListener, exposition done. m.play. m.remove from exposition. There we are. That should allow us to have our mission happen in the order it's supposed to happen in rather than randomly, or not randomly, but in the order we write it. So the basic options, the basic two setups here are a mystery can have itself, the exposition is what matters, right? So the mystery's exposition will always unroll in the way it's written, regardless of what order the player finds the doodads in. But if we click this, that's no longer true, and the individual doodads all have their individual elements. So inside of the HAB mystery, we're going to have to create some objectives. So if we take a look at how the objectives normally work, these objectives are highlightable objects, usually, but normally what happens is you've got a mission objective and you've got a mission scene, like so. And what happens is in this highlightable object, we fire the mission objective using an interface, using an interaction. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the highlightable object with just an arbitrary place in space. And that's going to fire off the mission objective. But the mission scene and the mission objective object do have to be on. So we're going to go ahead and create a sphere. And this sphere is going to be stuck into our HAB. Like so. Obviously, we do not want the actual mesh, and we do want this to be a trigger. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this HAB window. It's not it's a mission element objective. So then we're going to go ahead and add in an objective, and we're going to add in a mission scene, and then we're going to add in a mission scene element, which is going to be dialogue, I believe. Diving dialogue? No, it's called something else. Speak. There we go. Well, that's not what I wanted. Thanks for screwing up, though. Definitely helping me out. Come on, seriously? Fuck you. There's like one pixel where you can drag shit on these days. So we'll just add it there. And so what we can do is set this up. Boom. It didn't work. That's interesting. That's fine, though. We'll just drag it in manually. And this will be our mission scene for when we actually say stuff. We're just going to say the buddy is going to say something. This HAB was abandoned. And then the mission objective, we need to be able to fire this mission objective. And to do that, we're going to need a helper that responds to the on trigger, but we don't have one at the moment. We got an on start helper, but no on trigger helper. So we're going to go ahead and create one. Trigger volume. There we go. So this will just be a method of hooking up events to the trigger that we get. It should be pretty basic. I'm a little bit concerned that I don't already have one, though. Here's a collision responder. This is it. Okay, so never mind. We're going to delete that. I think my fridge might be dying. It's doing some really, really loud bombs. No, I didn't want it there. I wanted it there. There we are. So we got this wonderful error that keeps happening, and that's because we haven't actually set anything up yet, and it's trying to draw it. But that's not a big deal. We can just tell it to actually do its job. There, no problem. Still not really drawing it for some reason, but that's fine. So what we're going to want to do is attach that helper, collision responder. Just put that here somewhere in whatever 1 pixel space you can manage. And then what we're going to do is we are going to tell it to trigger our mission objective. Boom, like so. The only other thing we have to do is tell it to actually disable itself, because otherwise it will end up triggering over and over and over, and that's not really what we want. Boom. And we have this option to collide only with a specific game object, and obviously that's going to be the player. Like so. Let's see if it works. Turn around. Well, that's the collision volume. For some reason, it's not a trigger volume. Alright, let's take another look. How did I screw it up? Is trigger right fucking there. I mean, I can make it whatever size I want, but if I can't get in, it's not going to work. My assumption here is that I've somehow screwed that up and made it so that the player is not willing to go into something that's marked as a trigger. So to check that, we're going to go ahead and open up the player controller. And we're going to go over to the control, go to definition. And we're going to just take a look and see where the collider checking is happening. Those are tilts. I think I just need to... I'll try just putting it on another layer for now. I do need to do some work there, but since I have to replace the whole thing anyway, there's no particular reason to replace it now. I'll replace it later when I know what I want. So what we're going to do is move this from layer default to move this to ignore raycast. Ignore raycast should ignore the raycasts. We'll see. It might need to be a different layer than that too. It is definitely not ignoring the raycasts. I believe that what happens is I think I have to manually tell it to ignore the raycast, but for some reason it's being really obnoxious. I have had other trigger volumes. In fact, I still have other trigger volumes. So I'm not sure what's causing this particular glitch here. If we look over here, there are trigger volumes right in the middle of this area. If I can find them. They're basically invisible. Call it a fog setter. There it is. So these are the fog setters, and these change the fog values, although I haven't fixed them yet, so they're a little bit wonky. As you can see, what we've got is a level helper on player trigger entered. So we're actually using a different script for this, but it's the same basic idea. It's just got some stuff in it that helps. If we take a look at the box collider, it's just a box collider with a trigger, and the player can walk right through that one. Rick Medelser says, do I play games, and what games do I play? I do play games. I don't tend to play the newest games because I can't be bothered. I've been into RPGs recently, so I've been playing a lot of RPGs. Trying to think, I haven't actually done very much video gaming this week because I've been working on other projects. Now, we got to figure out why this... Wait, I should have checked something here. Fog setter, layer default. No, so that's not it. So if I delete this this hab window objective, just get rid of it for a second. Let's check and see whether or not it still gives us trouble, because maybe there's like something else. Rick Medelser says, The Outer Worlds is halfway decent. You should play that. I don't play things on Epic because I don't want to support their company. It's nothing to do with them having a shop. It's just that their company is makes all their money from aggressively marketing to children, and they're 10 times as effective as the next person who does it. So I consider that to be worthy of not supporting them. That's not something I want to support. But it'll come out in a year on other platforms, and I think that I'll go ahead and get it then. Okay, so there's some kind of other collision box right here. So I was confused by something unrelated, but what the fuck is this collision box? I did put a collider in this object, this one here. But you can see how that's nowhere near my player. So what the hell collider is this player colliding with? Well, let's move the objective off into the middle of nowhere so that we can test it, and then we'll try and figure out what the hell I screwed up. So the HAB window objective, we'll go ahead and put it out here somewhere. Well, the thing is that the colliders, they have their collision box drawn, so you can see it when you're in scene view. So this one works fine. But there's something over here on the actual zone. You can see how there's a giant sphere around this sphere. And I think what it might be is it might be the collider from the old version of the HAB box. Maybe I didn't delete it. Ah, here it is. So here's the old version of the HABs, and you can see that the S4.5 objects no longer even exist. So we'll just delete that. Now it should work. I need to unpause it so I can delete them again. All right, so you can see how much bigger the old mesh was. But what we need to do is bring that objective back into place. That's much too large. There we go. So the thing about that is that it doesn't conflict with anything else we do. It's just a standalone little blip. Now I could create an easier interface for standalone little blips, but I don't really know exactly what the best approach is yet because there are a lot of other options. So we're going to leave it for now, and we can always come back and tweak it later if necessary. Here we've got a box, and we can click on the box to get ourselves another objective. So you can see how this is going to come together where you are hunting objectives and there are also optional objectives. Moreover, you can actually have several missions running simultaneously, so there's no reason why you would only have one marker. You'd have like several different markers of different colors if you have other kinds of missions. The objective marker always points to the best signal, which is usually the closest objective. So if I were to come over here without getting that first one. Rick Metalster says, is that white circle always going to be around the player? I haven't decided yet. There are reasons why you want a horizontal circle around the player. I'm not really sure how I want it to be, though. It might not be a good idea. Looks too dev-y. So here you can see it's pointing off that direction, but if I come this way to get a little bit closer to this objective, it'll swing around to here. See? Well, let's go ahead and just take a look and see how the player feels without that horizontal element. There's the ring. Just disable it. So the reason that ring is there, it'll be, if I choose to keep it, it will be a holographic ring, not just a random floating thing. But if I choose to keep it, it'll be because it's hard to tell which direction is up when you're swimming around in certain places, especially when the camera skews like this. It might not be necessary, but as you can see, if I'm looking now, it's kind of hard to tell which direction up is. The ceiling in this case gives it away, but there won't always be a ceiling. like when I'm looking here and I can say, okay, well, which direction is up, really? The bubbles aren't even going up because they're misconfigured. They're going off to the side. Let's go ahead and fix the bubbles. Rick Metalster says that it feels better with the ring on. Yeah, that's what my thought is. But I want to fix the ring so it's not quite as ugly, and which is what we'll do. I'll go ahead and do that now. I just want to choose a different material. Here's a warning hologram material, which isn't quite what we want. But you can see that there's a problem with this, and that is that the circle that we're using doesn't actually have an unwrapped UV. Oh, this is just a really old file again. I've got to figure out how to reset these. I can't fucking see what I'm doing with the UI moving around everywhere. UV editor. There we are. You can see how there's no UV map. So if we were to unwrap this, you know what? If we're going to unwrap it, we should delete half of it. So let's, can I move this manually? How do you move this? You can't. Okay. And then we'll put on the mirror modifier, like so. And then when we UV unwrap it, we can do a project from view bounds. And that should, my bad, UV unwrap. And that should grant us this kind of visual. We can just save that and close it. It'll reload, and we should now have some kind of ring around us. So you can see that this is not a suitable object, but the kind of idea that we're going for is sort of like this, where it's not going to really be a physical ring. It's going to be some kind of holographic projection. If we take a look at the warning hologram, we've got this using the standard unlit particle engine, which works, so we might as well duplicate it. First off, we're going to rename it hologram warning. Then we're going to duplicate it and call it hologram orienting. And this is something we'll use in a couple of different places, but when we set this into the ring, boop, what we're going to do is we are going to switch out the albedo map. And we'll just switch over to something that is blue. And it doesn't really matter what it is, so we might as well use a normal map. Boom. Except I don't believe that's actually going to show up as blue. Nope, it shows up as red. Great. So we're going to try and find something that's actually blue. I don't know if I've got one. I guess I could always draw one. It's not that big a deal. Might as well. I mean, we'll make it green. There, it's green for now. So because this is unlit, it's going to be mostly transparent. But the problem here is that the map we're using doesn't have any transparency to it. So if we make it transparent, we'll be able to see through it. But I am worried about whether or not we're going to end up with something that works. If we use this to create some emission, I think that might be our best bet. So if we were to give this an albedo of 0, just make it completely invisible, but then give it an emission color, you can see how it doesn't really get along. That's a shame. So if we bring it up to a very, very faint... I'm trying to think about the best way to do this, and I think that having an emission color is the same as having an albedo because it's an unlit shader. So I don't think there's any reason to calculate them separately. For reasons unknown to me, this is black. It shouldn't be black. Why is it black? Oh, because it's in multiply. We'll just call this overlay. Additive? Additive. We'll call it additive for now. But for some reason, it's white. It shouldn't be white. It's fucking green. This is strange. Did the emissions screw up? Is that what happened here? I really don't know what's going on. It worked, and then I broke it, and now it's broken. The first time, I think it was because I was using the multiply, whereas with the additive, it's a different setup. But where's the alpha? No, that's still not right. This is very strange. Maybe we do have to use the emission because I can't get it to fucking work. So we'll go ahead and get that nice green emission too. I don't really care what it is. I don't know what's going on here. Rick Metalser says, what's the point of using mirror instead of having the full mesh? So it's going to be the same in the game engine, but when you're UV unwrapping and you've got mirror turned on, then the left half of your system and the right half of your system are going to be mirrors. So that if you use a UV map where, well, I can show you. The UV map we're currently using on our player for this thing here, this HUD guide. I've just got the options turned off. Let's turn them back on. There we are. This HUD guide. I've got the UV mirroring turned on, which means that it's split right down the middle, so that I don't have to worry about getting this thing precisely centered or anything like that. I can just go ahead and let it work. And I did the same thing with the outline. It's just there to keep things from getting off-centered if I do use a UV map. What I don't like with this, however, is the way that it is not giving me the things it's supposed to be giving me. And I don't know why that is, but I'll come back to it later. For now, it's enough better being partially transparent that I no longer feel like it's obviously just code monkey wankery. There are a lot of other options. I could break up that perfect circle. I could make it so that it's got like hoops or spikes or a second circle. But I don't want to draw attention to it. So maybe what I should do is actually cut out a chunk of it. And that's the HUD guide. There's the ring. So if I cut the center chunk out of it, maybe even more. Gonna reload. Oh, my voice is already going. Jeez. Oh, the Outer Worlds. I'm sorry. Outer Wilds is the one that I like. Wait, which one is the RPG? The RPG that's only available in the shop, that one shop. That's the one I haven't played. The one about exploring deep space from an indie dev, I've played that several times. I own it on several platforms. So I like this, but you can see that there's something strange happening with the way that this setup responds to being lit. See that? That is very weird. And what's happening there is that because it's inside of the glass, there's a transparent shader being applied on top of it. And then the transparent shader is like, I don't know what the hell's up with that. And that's because of the Z-writing issues that we've got. So in order for that to end up working, what we would need to do is change how that one shader is doing its Z-writing. And I'll do that later. Yeah, Outer Wilds is the one that I like. Outer Worlds, I'm sure it's great, but I'm not going to support Epic. All right, so that was a fun little hour. Let's just take a little bit more of a tour around to see how it feels. There are some, not issues necessarily with this, but there are some things with this that I would like to sort of fix. One is those bubbles. Let's go ahead and fix the bubbles since we're here. It's in a weird spot, huh? Okay, so here it is. And you can see that the bubbles are rotated out of our left skull. What we actually want to do is rotate them out on the y-axis. The problem is that I'm not sure that'll actually fix the deal. You can see how they are now definitely coming out on the wrong side there. They're off to the side of our skull rather than on top of our skull. This is because they're inherited from back when our skull was in a different spot, and I haven't fixed them at all. And that's also why our camera is a little bit off, or our rotation is a little bit off center. Let's go ahead and fix everything. So for our light, we'll just place it here. And that'll be better than what we had before. Now for the bubbles, this is all fine and dandy, but the problem is that I want them to move up without having to... Okay, so let's rotate them. Well, we'll figure it out later. I'll probably have to do a world coordinate position setup rather than what we're doing right now, because right now if I were to look over to the side like this, what happens is the bubbles fire into the camera in a really, really funny, stupid way. It's not too bad, actually. Maybe we'll keep it for now. Alright. We'll call that okay. Yeah, I'm starting to feel better about this. There are a lot of problems with the camera, but they're also linked to problems with the animation system. So we kind of want to tackle those both at the same time, and I'm really not sure that I want to tackle them this week. I think I'll want to wait a little bit longer. What I should really do is start to build up the level into something that's worthwhile. Not 100% sure yet. I might call it a day, unless somebody wants to see me work on something. Let's go ahead and put some masks on these characters. That'll be the first thing I do, I guess. Rick Metalster says to add some tunnels. Well, I've actually already added some tunnels. The question is, for a beginning level, tunnels might be a little bit too much. So, for example, here's a tunnel. So I've been keeping the tunnels small because this is supposed to be the first level and I don't want the player to feel confused. Rick Metalster says, you played Soma? I think that's something I saw a Let's Play of. I don't think Soma had very much free swimming. I think it was mostly stomping around on the ground. But what I need to do is think about how to spruce up stuff like this, because this is a setup where it's really, really obvious that we're using a height map, and it's really, really ugly. So in order to make this work, what I would need to do is to place edging elements. And what those would be is they would be elements where they just hide this edge a little bit, or they can be down here a little bit further and just hide the fact that this is a straight wall down, and they make it look like a cliff instead. Now, the only problem with that is that I don't have a tool to help me. So I would have to place that stuff manually unless I can come up with a tool to place it. Let's go ahead and just place it manually for a while. So in order to place it manually, we'll create a new object around here somewhere, which we'll call room 2. We do not currently have a room 2. We do, however, have a room 3 and a room 1. And this game object, which is room 3, so we'll stick it in room 3. So in order to create a room 2, we'll just do it. Create room 2. Boop. And all we're going to do is dump a bunch of rocks in and start to arrange them as we see fit. We don't really have any cliff rocks. Cliff rocks are a very specific visual that we don't currently use. We can either make some cliff rocks or we can use one of our other rock elements. If we take a look at what sort of prefabs we've got. Ropes. Rocks. So here's a couple of rocks that we've got. Cheap rocks are what we're going to use here. But we've also got some pebbles, which aren't going to be of any use to us at the moment, but we'll add them. And we have some level elements, but for some reason they're not here. Here is one of them, Tunnel 90A. Tunnel 90A is the closest thing we've got to a... oh, it's up there. Brilliant positioning. It's the closest thing we've got to a cliff element. But the problem is that it's specifically made for building tunnels, not cliffs. So it's not quite the right shape. As you can see, it's a 90-degree turn rather than a cliff. The part that we're supposed to see is this inner face, and that doesn't make any sense for a cliff. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop this open, and we're going to create ourselves a new 90-degree... No, don't delete. I'm sorry, a new planar element. So to do that, we will simply add a cube. And then we will move the cube's elements until they are how we want them to be. So there we go. Now what we'll do is we will just bevel everything a little bit. And then what we're going to do is just do some cuts. When we want to move things, we'll just switch over. Oh, fuck, this is an ancient file. Let's go ahead and not do it in this file. I changed my mind. We're going to close this file without saving. And then we're going to reopen it, but this time we're going to go ahead and just create a new one. Give me a second to wrestle with this. Boom. We'll create a new file, a new general file. Save it as rocks. Rocks. All right, I'll bring you back now. There we are. So this is how it's supposed to be arranged. That lame duck ancient file is just getting in my way. So there we go. Just do the same shit we did before. And then what we'll do is we'll use this with a random setup. That will allow us to sort of distort everything whenever we do anything. See? So what we'll do is we'll just grab a point and then we will, shift it. And our main goal here is to make sure that the edges don't have any obvious glitches, because if they have a glitch, then it's going to be hard for us to clean it. But I think we might have to clean that up after the fact. So let's just go for a decent shape right now. And we will clean up the mess afterwards. That's not too bad. All right, so now we're going to turn that off, and we're going to pull this stuff until it is in a good coordinate so that it's no longer erroring out. Just got to clean it up a little bit. That's a little too sharp. There we are. The other thing I want to do is I want to create one corner, at least one corner, that's just plain old round. Like that. That should help. I don't need to have a massive number of sharp corners. Some smoother corners are a good idea. Anyway, something like that. And you can see that what we've got is a fairly sharp little setup. It's got some really, really aggressive planes, and you might be thinking that it's not going to really work out very well. It will. Just give me a second to pull out this face. Sorry. Whoop. Stop that. Give this a little bit more body, I think. There we are. Last thing we're going to do, mark it all as smooth. Boom. And then we're going to need to cut this up so that we can give it a proper set of rocky faces. We could just use the Smart UV unwrap, but the problem is that that is going to cause us pain because it'll put a crease right where we don't want a crease. There we go. So if we look at how this is, come on. That's how it looks. It's not too shabby. It's not great. Let's go ahead and just clean it a little bit here. It's okay if these overlap. So we're just going to go ahead and make them much larger. There we go. And then we're going to rotate this 90 so that it's roughly the same orientation. That's good. Let's name it. We're going to call this one Cliff Rock A. And then we saved it. We can close this. It'll load up. Rocks. Boom. So if we take a look at the rocks, there it is. If we then grab the material we're using here, which is stone, shocking, I know. Drop that on the rock, and you can see that it immediately doesn't look too bad. It's quite large, but we can deal with that. It's quite large because it happens to be large. We can scale them without any challenge at all. So we're just going to grab this. Just want to get rid of this for a minute. Scale it down. Oh, you can see that we interpreted there's a bunch of stuff in here. Let's grab the Cliff Rock A and bring it out. Let's copy Cliff Rock A, paste it into Room 1. It doesn't get pasted into Room 1 because this version of Unity does not understand basic nesting. I think they fixed it, but I haven't downloaded the new version yet. Delete this because it's a piece of shit, and Unity broke basic functionality. Whatever. We're back in the game. So here you can see that we can just adjust this until it feels correct. And I think that we're probably going to want to do it with this setup here. Like so. So if you look at this, what we have is a rocky cliff edge. It's not perfect, but it serves as a huge advantage over just having a soft a soft edge like this. And these things are cheap. I can put, hundreds of them in with no difficulty. We are going to want to put a collider in, though, a mesh collider. And what I'll do is I'll just slip this in so that it's going to be trying to think about the best way to do this, and maybe, yeah, there we are. Yeah, that's how we want it to look. Not quite. The key here is I don't want the rope to intersect with it in quite the way that, I guess it doesn't matter because it'll recalculate and it'll work fine when it's recalculated. So we'll create a little like divot here. And that divot will be what draws the rope in. So we won't have to worry about the rope deviating from that particular little region. And if we just take a look, you can see how it's rough and we've got some nasty planes. But just tweaking it, you can bring this stuff into working. Now our other option is to create a spammer array, which does this stuff for us. But the spammer array is always going to have a lot more overhead in terms of it's going to use more objects, and the objects are going to need to be finely tweaked anyway. So in many cases, it makes more sense to just do it all manually. Now we're only using a single kind of cliff element here. In reality, we would want, more than one. Let's go ahead and just stick on some of these other elements until we get a good feel for it. Now, obviously, this is a very small rock, but we can always just scale it up. No biggie. And then we can just duplicate this and bring it across. Now, if we want to take a look, the weakness of this is this seam right here. This is the UV seam that we put in, and it might not be noticeable to you if you are not getting close. But once you get close, the UV seam becomes really apparent. So that's why this rock does in fact have a back face, and we need to be careful not to use that back face in any place where the player can get close, because if the player can get close, they're going to see it. But what we can do is we can just hide it. Rick Metalster says, in one phrase, can you describe good level layout? Literally the layout of rooms and stuff. I mean, I've put out some videos about that, but my specialty is not level design. So if you want to get really good advice on that sort of thing, you should probably visit a specialist. The things that I care about with the level design are mostly all about leading the player, making sure that you've got the right expectations, making sure that the player understands what they're supposed to do next, but making sure that it's also not a conscious thing. You want to lead the player's expectations without setting them up to realize they're being led. It's not really a phrase, but that's the sort of thing I think about when I think about this. So, for example, these ropes that I'm putting in, these over here, these literally just guide the player from objective to objective, and if the player wants to, they can just follow the ropes and get to the end of the level. But it's not me telling them to do that. And so hopefully it will feel a lot more organic. Mark Metalster says he sees that a lot in games. Yep. It is good practice. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this and paint texture to stone. We're going to go ahead and give ourselves a little bit of a larger brush and give it a little bit of some clumping. There we are. The idea here being that in these areas which are supposed to be stone, if they are stone, they should be stone. I know it sounds complicated. We're not going to want everything to be stone. There's supposed to be sand in the area. But we would like to break up these really obvious edges and make sure that they feel a little more organic and natural. Now, I don't have to do this for all of them. There are, in fact, ways to make these edges look okay without doing this, but I thought I would try it both ways and see which one feels better. So I've got another one over here, and we're going to go ahead and try and make this one feel proper. And the biggest way we're going to, without doing any sort of actual work, there's not going to be any meshes to hide this edge. And we're going to see how far we can take it with no mesh assist. We should be able to take it farther than I thought because of the way that this particular setup works. But it's important to really know and then look up close and see what works and what doesn't. We don't want it to feel half-assed. Even though it is half-assed, because I'm a hobbyist. Something like that. But the edges, you can see these are really, really awkward. So the two basic ways to make these edges look less awkward are to soften them and to break them. So we're going to do both. So we're going to use a nice hard edge. We're going to bring our brush size down to 1. 0.1. That's a new size. I never knew it could go that low. 1. There we are. And then we will do the soften. That's stamp. We can also do the unsoften. It doesn't really matter which one we choose. But basically, if we bring these lower elements up a little bit, we might be able to soften the system. Or we can bring these top elements down. Either one will work. And by softening that really aggressively hard edge, we can create a more natural edge. And then we'll put in some aggressively hard elements just to make sure, just to make it feel right at the end there. So anytime we've got an outcropping, I'm going to leave that hard, but I'm going to soften all of the places that aren't outcroppings. It's not being very nice to me here. Some of these refuse to soften. That's interesting. And then we're also obviously going to have to do it for this mess because the vertical elements are so ridiculous that they're impossible to take seriously. So we'll just bring them down. Make it so that they're a little bit less obvious. If the slope isn't 90 degrees, then we'll get some better visuals out of it. So that's what we're doing right now. We're just softening this all up until it's a little bit more approachable. All right, so this is the basic idea, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually carve out some more interesting edges. Oh, that didn't work. That was weird. Some more interesting edges with this so that it will feel a little bit more natural. We're going to do that using the set height, and I believe that this is set at 80. 80 is a little bit higher, so we'll go ahead and bring it down to, oh, we can just select it, right? Hold shift and left click. Boom. 76. So if we wanted to, we can just bring this out like so. Just a little bit of a horn. And that little bit of a horn should help to make it feel a little bit more natural. That's the idea anyway. The problem is that that little bit of a horn ends up causing a really sharp fall off, which is not something that most people will end up buying. Here you can see we've got a different height, so we're going to just resample and try one more time. Now what we'll do is we'll bring around 0 and we'll carve away some of these backgrounds with soft touches like this. This is very similar to the soften brush we were using, but it's a little bit more aggressive, so we have to be a little bit careful. That's not too bad. So let's go ahead and bring back the set height as a high option again, and just bring out this horn, and then what we'll do is we'll use this soft set height brush to kind of sloop up some of the cliff on the inside to make sure it doesn't feel too sharp as it goes down. You can see how we've got this nasty stretching. We're trying to get rid of that nasty stretching, at least soften it. And the easiest way to do that is to just use a nice soft set height brush to bring up the parts that are particularly badly stretched. Our opacity is a little bit high, which is why it's taking a couple of tries. I have to keep undoing every time I try to make it work because of our really, really high opacity. Let's go ahead and just bring that height back down. Let's bring that soften back in. Rec Metalster says that he likes it and it's very comic booky. Yeah, it's something where I'm not really sure how it's going to look in the long run, but clearly we need to do some work here in the short run to get it to feel right. Part of that is that there's this impulse when you are doing this sort of stuff to create like these really, really sharp valleys at the bottom. It's not actually how valleys work. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring up the sharp bottom element and create just a really nice layer of sediment at the bottom of that valley. And that'll help to soften things rather a lot. And we'll just repeat that process here. We still have some nasty curves. Let's go ahead and see what we can do with those. Can we smooth this down? Yeah, let's smooth this down because that is really aggressive. All right, so now I've gone ahead and done that. Let's go and take a look and see how that feels. So basically, the player will follow this. What is with this giant shadow? I must have something floating above the level that I forgot to delete. That's quite a shadow. Well, anyhow, the player will follow this. What is this? Oh, is that? That's right. The player will follow these cables, and they'll go through this little hole. And then they're here in this other area. And they can keep following the cables, or they can just go out on their own. Either way, they're going to find those cracks that we just created. So here is the mesh enhanced crack, which I just slapped some meshes in to try and break up the flow. These meshes need a little bit more support. What I would do is I would paint these edges with some additional rocks. But you can see that the advantage of this is that it actually breaks away from the height map's restrictions by going over the height map. It has like bulges and stuff that the height maps can't do. Still, that would need a little bit more work to make it look decent. Rick Meadows says I should add a glow to the blue cable line in the dark. It would look bitchin'. The blue cable line does have a glow. I can put in more glow. I can do whatever we would like. But that is one of my intentions, yes. This, however, is the one I put together out of pure height map. We have some issues with it here and there. It doesn't look as bad as I was worried it would. I think if I broke it up with a little bit of meshes and took a little bit of care with some of these set height nonsense elements, I think this might look okay. It certainly looks better than it did a second ago. I still don't like these walls, though, because these are so high and so sharp that they're almost impossible to really feel like they properly exist. In an actual underwater area, walls like this do exist. They're quite frequent. They're not usually proper rocks. There's an example of the kind of height map thing I want to avoid. They're not usually proper rocks. They're usually like fuzzy rocks, rocks covered in stuff. If they are just rock, then eventually the water will wear them down. But the basic idea here is we're going to go and do both. We're going to have, you know, the kind of best of both worlds approach. I think that this looks pretty solid, and then I can just decorate these edges rather than having to completely cliff them over. But these cliff rocks, what I'm going to have to do is replace them with... no, this is using generic stone, huh? Okay. What I can do is I can replace the rocks that we're using with just fewer random rocks instead of hand placing shit. So if we were to want to break up our little journey into the depths over here, what we can do, there we go, is we can bring something like this in. Now, because we're using a 90-degree switchover, we actually get a ground out of it, which I'm not sure is what I want, but it's certainly an option. So, for example, we could do something like that. It's not going to look great with this part over here, though, so let's... oh. We're definitely going to need some decorative stones. This is definitely not going to work just as its own thing. But you can see that we're not too bad off. It's not completely terrible. The only problem is that this height map is not quite perfectly suited. What we can do is move this stoop. You can see that that floor ends up being a little bit too much. By having this poke its head out of the water entirely, we don't have to worry about what it looks like at the top as much. But you can see this rope no longer really applies. So we've got a rope that's just kind of passing through shit. And if we want to actually come around and reach this spot, we're going to have to be a lot more careful because this is in the way. Rick Meadows says goodbye. Bye. So I guess we'll have to expand the area, which we can do with some set heights. Let's go and give it a softer. It was too severe as it was. Yeah, something like that might work a little bit better than what we were doing before. But basically what I would like to do is sort of hide this particular stretch, because that stretch is really ugly. A little bit better, yeah. Excuse me. So I think we can go ahead and do some decorating and see how it feels. If we just grab some of these rocks and just place them, eventually we'll do it randomly. I've already got a rock sprayer that works fine, but I just want to see how it feels. So we're also going to want to break up we're going to want to break these up a little bit to make them feel a little bit more natural, and maybe some surface decoration will help there. There we are. It's actually really hard to see where they are, but they're floating, so let's not have them float. That's a little bit silly. And I think I want to duplicate some rocks. There's Cheap Rock B. Cheap Rock B is tiny. So we'll just make it a little bigger, and then we'll put it over here because this area looks really crap. And basically, if we have this cheap rock kind of hanging off the edge, it might help to break up the verticality of that edge a little bit. Still, that ends up looking a little silly. We may have to do a little bit more than that. Let's go ahead and get some texture painting going. And we're going to obviously want to paint some rocks here and there because these are a little bit too crisp, a little too crunchy. Let's just change our brush shape. There it is. There we are. But we also want to bring in some sand. And the idea here is that this sand will be a good opportunity for us to bring in like sand falls and other smaller sand things. And that can soften up, oh, it's the wrong sand. And that can soften up these kinds of vertical elements because they might not look right if they're all rock, but if they're sandy, you can think of them as like the sand is falling off of the surface and covering the rock, right? No big deal. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here. We're going to add in just a little bit of brightness here and there to try and make this sandfall seem a little bit more alive. Too much brightness. We'll just make this a nice big brush for a minute. This is not as natural a shape as I thought it was. There we are. It's a little bit better. Yeah, it's not too shabby. And then we can take this back down to like this and just like put in a little bit of decoration here and there. Try and break up this overwhelming repetitiveness. So this streak here will show the player that there is something at the end of the tunnel, although they should be using the line, half buried in rock now, but still there. So what we'll do is we will select that line. There it is. And all we really want to do is to recalculate this rope. So it errored out. I believe it errored out because the handles are in the wrong spots. Let's take a look. Where the fuck is the handle? Oh, it's not selected. All right, so here we've got one that's kind of floating, but there is a problem. There is a ledge. So we'll... Oh, is it locked in place? There it is. Just move that up. Now we're not getting to it, so there must be something else happening here. That part's still fine. You can see how it goes fine, and then it comes over here, and then it rips apart between those 2 points. And my assumption is that there is a collision along this rope. Well, I can fix that. Grab midpoint 1 here and pull it way up. Why can't I see the red line? There should be a red line connecting these elements together. Oh. So if we take a look, what we've got here is this rope is actually punching through. Then we got this down to here, goes up to here, and then it comes straight along here. There's nothing in the way, so I'm confused as to why it's erroring out. Obviously this midpoint is a little bit iffy. Ah, maybe that was the problem. It just didn't like that midpoint. Yep. All right, so let's change this one so that it's not in a weird spot anymore. There we go. The rope came back. This handle over here is not really very convincing. Okay, so that's a little bit delicate. Well, we can always just take that thing and move it over to create another one. Let's go ahead and set these 2 midpoint cubes. Oh, this is not the right. It's this one. So we're going to just drop this one down here. There we are. And then we'll just change these 2 cubes to using a material that doesn't look quite so weird. Do we have metal corrugated? I don't know if that'll look good. Let's try it. No. Metal flat. There we are. Not ideal, but a little bit better. Let's see how it looks. And then we're going to be done for the day. So this is your last chance to ask questions if you've got any. So when I think about the sorts of things we're going to be putting down here, it's going to be almost entirely natural decorations, stone. There won't be much like upturned ships or anything. Because this area is not really about that. This is the science area. So the only things that I don't want to feel like natural areas, I want to feel like guides. I want you to follow anything that seems out of place because it's leading you to where you're trying to get. But that means that we're going to have to rely very heavily on decorating the stone in lots of different ways. We're going to have to use bulky things, and that's going to include plants, maybe coral, some of those tall frilly plants. Those are always fun. And fish. There's lots of types of fish. We're going to have to put in some of them. Yeah, this actually feels pretty good. I like it. There are still some errors, like I've got that one little really sharp point for no good reason over there. The rock that I added here fits in just fine, and it just does it does its job just well enough to break up that line. But if the player decides they're going to try and go down, they're going to notice pretty quick that that is obviously not valid. That's obviously just streaky game dev bullshit there. But it's not too shabby at the moment. This handle needs to be moved or anchored, but we're not at not the final version yet, so it's okay. So you can see that this tumble down area feels a lot less fake, but this wall still feels pretty shitty. So we'll have to do more work. But not today. Today we're done. I'm just trying to work out the details of how this sort of thing feels. Why is this so fuzzy? Whatever. Bunk. Alright, well thank you for your time, everybody. I hope you have a nice day. I'm going to take some screenshots and then we'll call it a day. So I think this will be a fine screenshot right here. Just finding an angle that does the kind of the best of both worlds if I can. I don't know if I can. That'll do. Think that'll do? Good enough. Wait until that puff clears out and then we'll call it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice night.